Welcome! Thank you so much for joining me on the Socially Delightful podcast. I'm Jewel, human connection enthusiast and your host, and this show is all about delighting in yourself, delighting in socializing and in others, and creating truly supportive, delightful friendships and relationships, even in our modern world with our modern stress. In this podcast, we have fun creating a new culture of living in social delight. Now let's dive into how we're going to do that today.
Hello and welcome back to the Socially Delightful podcast. We are having a delightful time over here with my friend Lucy. She just found a spider on her mic and I wish we were recording for it. It was so funny.
It was horrible. I want them to live, but I don't want them to be on my things.
Yeah, and on your mic when it's literally so close to your face.
No, thank you. Thank you.
That was, oh my gosh, y'all.
I wish we were recording that.
Yes, I'm literally laughing so hard I can feel my stomach hurt. That was so funny. So I'm going to jump in, y'all. I'm going to tell y'all, we have a really great episode ahead of us today with my dear friend. I have to tell y'all, too. One time I was working, and this was I lived in a different place in my old space. I was working, doing my thing, coaching. I think it was in between sessions, actually. So I was just coaching. Or no, not just coaching. I was just working. There we go, words. And a spider came down from the ceiling and right on my desk. And I was like, nope, that's it. Nope, we're leaving. And I left.
No, thank you.
Literally for the day and worked other places. But oh my gosh, to have it on your mic, wow. Amazing.
They just want to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
He's like, spiders, we need to rise up. People need to hear our voice. All they do is scream at us, and we deserve better.
we deserve to. We need to rise up. I'm dying. I'm dying. It reminds me too, especially now we're getting into fall. It reminds me of my favorite meme. It happens every year, where they're like, takes the spider webs down, dusts everything, puts up fake cobwebs. The spider's like, what the hell?
He's like, I did this for you for free.
Yeah.
And you're out here spending time and money putting up these cobwebs you could have had for free.
So rude. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, welcome everybody to the Socially Delightful podcast. Welcome, Lucy. So, for those of you that don't know, we're going to get into all of Lucy's stuff, what she does. She does such incredible work in the world. And Lucy is also a dear, dear friend of mine. I think of Lucy as like one of my business besties, like somebody that we just like collaborate on. And we need to have you come back. The topic today is going to be so good, but we need to have you come back to talk about friendship and business, because I feel like our connection and how we have supported each other since I've known you, but really, like, I feel like we've gotten so much closer,
year especially.
Yes, and we had like regular meetings where we were just like supporting each other in all these different kinds of ways, giving each other feedback, giving each other like coaching and encouragement, and it's so uplifting, y'all. But that's a topic for another day, so stay tuned. Today's topic I'm so excited about. Today we're going to be talking about heartbreak and how to cope with heartbreak. We're going to be talking about heartbreak in friendships as well. So Lucy is a breakup and relationship coach who helps people get over their ex and move on to a life they love. Her process includes a combination of mindset, emotional regulation, and practical relating skills, which we are all about here on the Socially Delightful podcast, right? So you can, just to tell you all right now, well, of course, we'll like hype her up at the end, but you can connect with Lucy on her social media channels at lucy.m.price or her website, which is www.shiftyourstory.net. She has a $25 workshop. Do you want us to tell us a little bit more about that workshop?
Yeah, so that workshop is a 90-minute workshop, and it just breaks down what I call the moving on process, which will support you in the practicals in getting over your ex, starting to process and heal in the heartbreak, and then move on and create a life that is beautiful and even perhaps better than the one you had with your ex. So it's very much practical tools that you can apply for yourself in that workshop. So I always like to put that one out there as a starting point, and if it resonates with you further, you can dive into everything else. But that's the one where I found, like, if you need a toolbox to help you in your breakup, that's the toolbox.
Oh, and I love it. I love the accessibility of it all, everything, making it super clear for people. And that is hugely why I'm so excited to talk to you today, and why I just adore you and admire you and appreciate you as a friend. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, and I love that, right? We talk about, and I know you and I both talk about this a lot in our own like lives as we're connecting and supporting each other. But I love that your process is a mix of mindset, emotional regulation, and practical relating skills. I think that's really important. So can you tell us a bit for how you put this process together? Like, what's the story behind how you put this together?
Well, one of the things I noticed around breakups in particular is that there wasn't a lot. This is my opinion. I don't think there was a lot of resources out there to support people through their breakups. I think there have been three common things that we always get told about our breakups, which is it just takes time.
Yeah.
You just need to, get under someone else or date other people. You just need to move on. And it's just like, it's not very helpful. Like, what do you do with that? Do you just wait for a bunch of time to pass? Well, if you wait for a bunch of time to pass, but you don't actually process your feelings, you don't actually make shifts in your life, you don't look at the beliefs and the thoughts that are going on underneath that, then probably what you're going to find is a lot of the things stay the same. You still have the same thought patterns, you're still doing the same things, and so you're getting some of the same results. Now, of course, there's variance in that. Life happens. Sometimes you move through life and you get different perspectives just by your interactions with people, or you start thinking about things differently. But I really just noticed that a lot of the resources out there felt to me more like avoiding looking at the breakup and distracting yourself from the breakup. Like, that was the other big one, was you just need to distract yourself. You just need to not think about it. And there's a time and place for distracting yourself. But when you are constantly distracting yourself, when you are not looking at your thoughts, when you're not looking at what's going on, that's making it harder for you to move on. I think that really it's no wonder why it's difficult. So I saw a lot of that out there. And I started to think to myself, okay, what toolbox do I have? What skills do I know from my coaching, from my training, that I think would be more helpful than just distracting yourself and just dating other people and perhaps even repeating the same patterns in your relationship, because again, you're not addressing things. And that's when a lot of the mindset tools came out and a lot of the practical relating skills came out. So I kind of pieced it all together, and the moving on formula is kind of what I've nicknamed it. But that's when I look at, okay, what are the thoughts and the beliefs that are kind of keeping you looping? How can we start to shift those thoughts? Like, how can we start to shift those beliefs? What are the feelings that keep coming up for you? How can we start to shift those feelings? And then practically, how can we start looking towards the future? Like, how can we start setting goals? How can we make it easier for those goals to be achieved? How can we hold you accountable? And that's where everything thread together. And in my own breakups, I noticed that to be more helpful. And so I started testing it with people, and I noticed the same thing, that having something tangibly that you can latch onto and work with tends to be more beneficial than just distracting yourself and waiting for time to pass and hoping that things are going to be different later.
So beautifully articulated, beautifully said. I love so much how you talked about like testing, how you talked about like bringing tools and things together. I think that is just like, as a coach in this field, and yeah, this is a topic for another day, but I know you and I both really pride ourselves on doing really quality good work and staying within the scope of our practice. And I think you are like, so as your friend, I'm also like excited because I'm like, oh my gosh, she articulated that in such a way without having to say it. And of course now I'm bringing it up, but so well said. But I think too, hearing, right, oh, it just takes time, distract yourself, and hearing like that trope, like, in order to get over somebody, you got to get under somebody else. I think that those tropes, like, and just noticing, okay, what can I actually do? How can I get out of it? I love that you described it as a loop, because I've been through heartbreak. I've been through breakup. I think most people at some point, that is something that they go through, whether it's romantic or not. But truly, everything you just described, and I'm not even like trying to pretzel this and make this relate to friendship, everybody. Like, this is the facts. Like, I had a huge friendship breakup in college. My freshman year of college. Oh yeah, OU. At Oakland, University. Yes.
For people who don't know, we lived on the same floor our freshman year of college.
Yes, our roots go back all the way there.
All the way
so
back.
Fun. But I was going through a friendship breakup at that time with my childhood best friend, and maybe I'll get to that story at some other day because it is wild. But truly, I was heartbroken for like 2 years because I was doing the looping. And I love that you called it that, because that is exactly what I was doing, and that's exactly what I was like spiraling in. And I think as well, because it was with a friend and not a partner, there was a little bit more extra, at least for me, I added a little bit more extra shame on top of that, because I was like, oh, like I shouldn't be this upset over a friend as well, right? And I did like all the things that you would do with an ex. Like, I was trying on social media to look like I was super happy and like life was fantastic, because I wanted to prove to her I was like fine without her, like stuff that you would do. It's very similar. So can you describe a little bit more of like what that looping is for somebody, like what that really looks like and how we might interrupt it?
Yeah, so I think one of the examples I think of with looping, I'm just going to give a couple examples. I think
Yeah.
that's a little easier. So a behavioral loop might be like the constant urge to check their social media. I think that's a common one that we experience. So like that urge, just like open the phone, get on the Finsta, use your friend's account, look at their stories, try and suss out everything that's going on. And it's just that looping. And you notice like, okay, you look at the social media, but then you don't actually feel better. Your brain tries to convince yourself that you're going to feel better. You never tend to really do.
Right.
And then you feel bad about yourself. And then you're thinking about them all day. And then you're pulling out the phone again. And so in a situation like that, we might start to look at, okay, what are the things that are contributing to looking at your ex's profile? So I like to look at both the thoughts and then the practical elements too. Like, how easy is it for you to look at their social media? Like, how many gaps are there between you and the action? Which, by the way, like, social media companies pay people lots of money to keep you on the apps. Like, they pay a lot of money to learn how to keep you on the apps and keep you coming back. So like, if it feels hard for you, there's also an element there where people are making it very hard for you for a reason. Capitalism. But like in terms of, okay, what are the thoughts leading to you looking at your ex's profile? Maybe that's, oh, you want to see if they've moved on already. And so that's the reason you're looking at the profile. You want to compare where you're at to them. You want to see if they're dating someone else. You are trying to comfort yourself in some way. So like, what are the thoughts that are leading you to the action? And how can we start unpacking those thoughts a little bit and shifting those thoughts and seeing like, okay, what other thoughts are available here? What other perspectives are available here? What results you want for yourself? Okay, what thoughts can we practice to help you start getting those results and steering you in a different direction? And it might be like, I kind of imagine a ship. It might be like just inches, but after a while, those inches add up and they compound on themselves, and you notice that you're going a completely different direction than you were before. So some of it is like the thoughts, but then also the practical elements too. And it's scary for a lot of people, I think, to think about like unfollowing their ex or muting their ex or blocking their ex. I think that in separations, there's an element of having to be honest with yourself of what is best for you right now, and how can you back that up with your actions and with really practical tools. So, okay, if it's just easy for you to go on their profile, or, because you were connected so much, the algorithm has them at the top of your feed every time you're opening Instagram, can you unfollow them? Okay, if you unfollow them and that's still not doing it, can you block them? Can you make it pretty impossible for you to see their profile? Like, what are the steps we can put between? Can we turn off notifications on the phone? It can look like a lot of different things. It tends to be a little bit different for each person, but like, that's kind of one of the loops that I tend to see. An easier example is just like, you constantly feel the urge to check their social media. You're not getting out of that habit. What are the thoughts and what are the behavioral pieces that we can use to really get you close to your goal of like not looking at their social media so much?
Yeah, I love that. And even if people don't have social media, they have other loops, right? And so noticing those loops, those habits, those behaviors. But I think social media is a really common one because, like you said, they literally call it the race to the bottom of the brainstem, which is so weird because our brainstem is where all of our, like, in my opinion, this is very paraphrased, but where all of our like automatic like survival functions are. So like that's so
Yeah.
messed up. But so I think that's a common one that people really struggle with. So I appreciate you bringing that example up particular. And again, so this is for heartbreak, right? Like this goes for your romantic relationship and this goes for your friendships. I also just, and as somebody who knows a bit about your story, and of course, share what you're comfortable with
Yeah.
only, but I also just want people to know too, like, why is this work in general important to you?
Yeah. So this work, I think that, so I'm kind of repeating myself a little bit, but like part of it is because I went through some really hard heartbreaks. And of course, like I think a lot of coaches and a lot of therapists have origin stories like that, where they realize how much they want to support people with the support that they needed, or that they just want to gift people like tools that they can use to support themselves and get them closer to the outcomes. And for me, I had a lot of rockiness in my relationships. In college, especially, I had very intense relationship anxiety. And I grew up in a home where there was a lot of friction in the home. There was a lot of upset in the home. And so my dynamic in relationships tended to be very embedded with anxiety, a lot of stress. I was, to own my stuff, like there's a lot of things I didn't know how to deal with. And so my responses was lacking boundaries, or trying to overcompensate, or being short with people, or not being clear with what I wanted. And so I went through a lot of trial and error in my relationships. And I went through a lot of really hard heartbreaks and relationship dynamics that didn't serve me. So like I had a very I learned a lot, but it really wasn't until I started getting into like first therapy and then coaching that I started to really start shifting these patterns and learning these tools, and really seeing how much power we do have over our mindset and our actions and the results that we get in our lives. We can't control everything, but we can control what we can control. And so I started to reflect on when I was starting to get into coaching and, finding my niche and all of that. Like I started to think about, what do I care about the most? And where do I feel like there's a gap in resources right now? And so going back to like, I think there's a gap in support around breakups. I think that a lot of the advice isn't actionable, isn't, it's a little outdated in my opinion. And so I started to think about like, okay, this is something I care about. This is something where I can bring compassion to the conversation, because I have an understanding of what these people are going through and where they want to be. Like a lot of my clients, they want to be moving on. They really want to be like in the next chapter of their life and figuring out like, okay, where do I want to go from here? What do I want for myself? Where do I want to build up my life and form new communities and things like that? So a lot of it is from seeing a gap in the market, which is very business speak, but it is kind of the case. And then also just, I think I know that there's so many more resources out there for people going through breakups. And I have tools that people can use that I wish I had at the time.
Yeah. Yes. And I love that. I've said this a lot with things that you have said in this episode, but I love that so much because, and I don't think I've ever actually said this to you before, but the way I think about my work in the world and the way that I think about your work in the world, which is part of the reason why I love partnering up with you on all business stuff and things like that, is that we have shitty cultural social scripts for these things, right? Like that's it. Let's just be real. That's a shitty social script for get over someone by getting under, right?
Totally. And like to add on to, I'm going back, but like the conversation around friendship breakups, like we do put so much more shame on friendship breakups, but also sometimes you are more vulnerable with friends than you are in your romantic relationships. And that's just the truth. Like sometimes your friends are more intertwined in your life than some romantic relationships are. And the loss is there. Like you feel the loss. And yet we have this shame around it because they're your friend. Like, of course we have to be mindful of how we operate and how we do things, but they hurt. Like friendships breakup hurt. You have to adjust. It's an adjustment.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I want to get more into that, but I love so much of what you were doing, and I'm so glad to have you here because I'm hoping we can shift some of those social scripts. And by you doing your work in the world and talking about these tools and these things, we are changing our social scripts. And think about how empowering that is. One thing that I think about often, especially sometimes when you're like have a doubt and you're like, does what I'm doing matter? Or like, should I stop being an entrepreneur? Which happens, I feel like, to every entrepreneur. But
yes,
when that comes, right? When that
we've had conversations.
Oh yeah, we've had conversations. And I feel like when that comes up, one thing that I always go back to is I think about the social scripts I had even 10 years ago, just 10 years ago when we were in high school, and how shitty they were and how much they have grown and changed. Like I feel like even the way that we apologize or like our conversational scripts have changed for a lot of us. And so that is one thing that like keeps me in this and is like, yes, people need this. First of all, they want to apply it, not just know about it, but also this is how we shift culture. So that's my little sidebar there. But when it comes to Heartbreak 2, I know that it's also such intense emotion, right? As both of us have gone through it, I know that it is so much intense emotion that it sometimes can feel debilitating, but it's just, even if when it's not and you're just going through the motions, like that pain is just sitting there. And this goes too for some people, like that no matter if you were going through heartbreak right now, no matter your intensity of heartbreak, no matter if it was a friend or a romantic partner, because even as well, we also feel that loss when our friendships start to shift and change, even if somebody has moved, or even if, right, like you are starting to go down a different path than this friend is, and right, your priorities are no longer each other. Like as far as like you guys are prioritizing other people, things like that loss is there, that heartbreak is there. So no matter the intensity, like what are the things that you want somebody to know, to have in their toolkit, or to be aware of if they are feeling heartbreak right now?
I would say I have a few things, but like the first thing that came up for me is that it's okay to feel what you're feeling. And I know that is such a cliche answer. So that's why I kind of like pause and roll my own eyes internally. But really, I think that so often we attach so much shame to what we're feeling. The way that I see this in breakups, especially friendship, romantic, no matter what it kind of looks like, people fading out of your life, is it often comes through in the thought of, I shouldn't feel this way.
Yeah.
I shouldn't feel this way because we've been broken up for 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. I shouldn't feel this way because we only dated for 3 months. I shouldn't feel this way because they're just a friend. I shouldn't feel this way because I should be over it by now. And we should on ourselves and we shame ourselves. And so I think that there's an element like that just comes up a lot, this feeling of I shouldn't feel this way. And so when you have those pangs of heartbreak, or you're noticing that loneliness come up, like when those thoughts start coming through, I think that's an opportunity to pause and actually give yourself a moment to validate what you're feeling. If nothing else, just saying it's okay to feel this way. Like, this is a feeling, and this feeling is here right now, and it might not be here in, another 2 minutes or, 20 minutes or whatever, but it's okay that it's here. Like, it gets to be in the room too. I think that a lot of friction in our emotions can come up when we're making ourselves wrong for what we're feeling.
Yeah.
And there's an opportunity just to recognize, okay, that's what I'm feeling, and it doesn't have to mean anything. I can just let myself feel these sensations, and that's okay.
Yeah. Which I think applies to so many negative emotions, and especially an intense one like heartbreak. One thing that, all my clients know is I talk about these studies that show when we resist anxiety, for example, when we're like, oh, I shouldn't feel social anxiety, this shouldn't be here, it does not help. And in times it can actually make it worse because now we're just anxious about being anxious.
Yeah.
So I think that is really helpful for everybody to have some acceptance, and honestly too, like mindfulness, to like sit with the emotion, accept that it's there, not make it wrong, not add another layer of shame on top of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, in my yoga teacher training, I learned this phrase of like, what you resist persists.
Yeah.
And I think that tends to pop up in many areas, including feelings. So when you mentioned that around anxiety, I've often heard of it like a beach ball in water. Like, if you keep trying to shove down the beach ball, it's just going to whack you in the face. And yeah, I think that allowing yourself to feel the sensations, not make yourself wrong for it. And I hope this doesn't come off as another cop-out, but also that it's okay to get support for what you're feeling.
No, we love that.
Yeah, we love that. And, so this isn't something that I don't think I speak about this much, but one of the things I do when I do client intakes, and I'm sure you do this too, we've talked about this, is like, I make sure, like, are you a good fit for coaching right now, or would you really benefit from therapy? And like, I refer people out if they're at that place. And I think like just being brave to like even reach out to someone and be like, hey, I think I want some support, and allowing like yourself to get that support, whether that be through therapy or whether that be through coaching. If you're at a place where coaching is, the stage you're at, I think it's just helpful to be willing to ask for that support. Because again, like in terms of making things wrong, like we so often make ourselves wrong for getting support. I shouldn't need support around my breakup. I should just be able to get over it. I should just be able to go over him, her, them. And it's like, humans were meant to be supportive. Humans were meant to support each other. We're not actually meant to be as isolated as we are. And it is affecting us a lot. Very, at the Empower Her conference that we were at, 1 in 4 women feel like they don't have someone they can call on if they're going through a hard time. Like, that's not supposed to be the case, in my opinion. And so I think that just even being like, you know what, there's something alive here, and maybe that support just looks like a friend. You just need to talk to a friend about it. You just need to get it off your chest. Maybe it looks like, talking to a therapist. Maybe it looks like, ready to like get some coaching around your thoughts. But I think that being willing to say, you know what, I need some support, or I desire some support, I think is I think it's helpful too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, you were so, I mean, obviously, right? We are so about connection and getting supported here. And it reminds me, I found this article. Now, I read articles every day. It's just who I am. It's
I
to
admire that so much about you. Like,
Thank
seriously,
you.
it's like so incredible.
Thank you so much. It's truly sometimes disruptive to my work, to be honest. So ADHD. So there we go. But my partner always jokes. He's like, "What rabbit hole did you go down today? Like in the middle, like in your breaks and things like that." And a lot of times I have Google alerts for friendship, connection, social confidence, all these things. And so a lot of times it's things around that. Sometimes it's, things around, I don't know, like who really was Marie Antoinette? I don't know. So things like that. But
Yeah. Yeah, who was she?
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh, I could tell you all about it. But anyway, so
my rabbit holes are like more about crafts and like journaling.
I love that. I didn't know that about you. I love that. But one thing I found, and I didn't save it. So if anybody can find it, I have been searching for this because it was so interesting to me, and there's not a ton out there on it. I've been having a hard time finding this specific information, this article, and it was talking about how when we feel sad, they argued anyway that we need to be seen by another person. And that makes so much sense because even if I'm sad and I'm tired and I have a minor inconvenience, like if I'm jet lagged and exhausted and like rip like a bag of chips and it gets all over the place and I trip in it or whatever, and even though like in a normal day that would be completely fine and not a big deal, if I'm like sad, like toddler level tired and sad, I want my partner to be there and to help me clean it up and be like, it's okay.
Yes.
Right? So situations like that, like we need to be seen in this. So I think you're so right on that, like getting support and being that support for yourself. So many of us, and hugely part of the reason why I do what I do, is I'm not very close to my family. I love them, and maybe that's not the correct phrasing for it, but I'm not going to get my emotional needs met there. It's just not going to happen, and that's okay because I have built other spaces for me to do that. And so, and one way to do that is to also be there for yourself, and the things that Lucy and I have talked about like emotional regulation, not making yourself wrong, having those kind of conversations where you're like, it's okay for this emotion to be here, this heartbreak to be here, doesn't mean anything else. So helpful. Now, I want to get to a couple of Reddit stories. However, one thing that I have some thoughts about, but I'm curious on your thoughts about, are what to do when you share friends with an ex, which, by the way, for everybody listening, is so funny because the person that edits my podcast is my ex and one of my best friends. But that's a story for another day. Like, peer pressure him if you want, or comment if you want
Bring
him to
him
be
on
on.
the podcast.
I'm trying. He's gonna cut this out anyway. He's really no.
I'll know if you do, Nick.
Yeah, Lucy will know. So
just a side note quickly,
yeah.
Jewel, something that I've really appreciated about your work, because as someone who I'm also not so closely connected with my family, part of that is because my family lives in a different country. Part of it is, again, because I grew up in a house that had a lot of friction. Part of it is because my family's English and emotions aren't super talked about in the English culture. That's changing. We're making some progress. But something that I've appreciated so much about your work is the again, practical tools and resources that you have to create connection, and the not just like deep emotional relationships, yes, that too, but also the wide range of relationships that people need in their lives. And I think that I don't know. I just really appreciate that. And I wanted to say that to you and give you credit because it's important work. Going back to like gaps in like support in society right now, I think you're filling a really important gap in society. And I just want to give you credit.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. I received that. I feel all good and lovely. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So,
But shared friends.
yes.
Yeah. So I have, so I'm going to kind of talk about two different things, which is first, I want to talk about can you be friends with your ex? And then I want to talk about shared friendships in with an ex. Does that feel okay for you?
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm a personal believer that you can be friends with your ex, but I think you should be mindful around the reasons why and if it's the healthiest thing for you to be in a friendship with your ex. I have some exes that I am friends with, and I would call them like more passive friendships. Like they're not someone I'm telling my vulnerabilities to, but they're someone I would hang out with on a Friday afternoon kind of thing. One of my exes is actually how I met my current partner is through my ex. So like, and they're good friends, you know? So it's like, I think you can be friends with an ex, but I think you just have to be mindful of what your reasons are. Like, are your reasons you don't want to lose this person and so you'll take anything? Are your reasons that you're hoping you'll get back together with them someday? Or are your reasons that actually like there's someone who you want to have a friendship with, or you were friends first, you tried the romantic thing, it didn't really work and you went back to being friends. Like, so I think you can. And I just wanted to talk about that because we both have an ex that we're friends with. And I think people have that question of like, can you be friends with an ex? Some people are adamantly no. And I also think that it's okay for you to have your own personal preference. Like if you're like, you know what, it's just not good for me, no matter which way to be friends with an ex, that's okay too.
Yeah.
And it's also okay if you do feel like you can be friends with an ex, if you do feel like that romantic element isn't there, but there's a really beautiful friendship there. I'm personally a believer that the romantic can get out of the picture. That's just what I've experienced. That is what I've seen happen. But that's not the case for everybody, nor does it have to be the case for everybody. So that's that. Then we get into like the shared friends category. And I know that that can be difficult for people. So the first recommendation I have for people is actually to have a social group outside of the social group they have with their ex. My mindset around that is, I'm just going to be blunt. Like sometimes we're human and we just need a vent. Like sometimes we just need to like talk about our feelings and not feel like we need to censor ourselves, not feel like, you know, we need people to take sides. We just need a process. We just need to have people who are there for us and not there for both of you. And so I personally think like having a social group, having people you can go to outside of the social group that you've built up with your ex is really helpful. And that can be like more close relationships. It doesn't necessarily have to be. Like it could just be, you know what, going to sit I'm a knitter. So I go to a knitting circle every week.
I love that.
I'm like literally I'm an old English woman inside of here. But like it could be like going and sitting around those people. There's someone at the knitting circle who's going through a separation. We're not that close, but she's talked to me about it for the last couple of weeks, and that's okay, you know, because it's what's alive for her, and she just wants to be seen and witnessed and heard. And sometimes that's what we just need from our relationships. So maybe that looks like family. Maybe that looks like for me, it was old college friends, like not people who were living in my town, but people who know me and love me. Like that's who I went to when I was going through my last breakup, and we had a ton of shared friends with each other in town. I just needed to be seen and supported by people who weren't by people who didn't have their own skin in the game. And I think that's the hard thing to hold as someone who's going through a breakup, because I think there is a self-protectiveness that comes over for a lot of people of like, be on my side, like choose me, like, or I'm right. And I think that the hard thing for friends is that they have their own relationships and they have their own stakes in the game. And so I think having friends who don't have that, who can just support you, or family who doesn't have that and can just support you, or again, a therapist, a coach, is really priceless. I highly recommend either leaning into the support systems you have, or again, like finding those little hubs and communities and using those spaces.
I love that. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think as well, going to other people, I think that is really helpful and makes a lot of sense. I think too, not everybody has, and it doesn't make them wrong, it doesn't make them less than, but as somebody who's been through multiple breakups and heartbreaks, and that makes a lot of sense. Just to give examples, in one of my heartbreaks or my breakups, we were able to like jokingly like split custody of our friends is what we talked about. And we were able to go to other people, I think, for a lot of the really like emotional, like, okay, I need to be seen in this things. But we were able to split custody, spend time with those friends. And it takes like a level, I think, of compartmentalization, honestly, of both people, like the friends and you, for like, okay, I'm not going to talk to these people about it and put them in that situation. I want to be supportive of their friendship, or just even be, if you're not supportive of their friendship, if you're, I don't know, if your ex was the worst and they're still friends with him, I don't know, or whatever.
Well, I
maybe.
had that situation,
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's, let me tell you, it's not easy.
Yeah.
And so like part of me coming at this perspective, like, my personal story. So, to the listeners, I do apologize. I'm not going to get into the details of it. It's just like, maybe I will someday, but at this point I'm just like not there. But like I had a really horrible breakup dynamic with someone, who, from my perspective, had a pattern of not treating women kindly, respectfully, quote unquote, right. And I had friends who were still friends with him. And it's hard because, like, of course, every like gut reaction I have is like, WTF? Like, you literally called this out with me, but you're still friends with them. And I think that's where it goes to, like, they have their own relationship and their own skin in the game, and it's really hard to hold, but their relationship with them is different than the romantic relationship with you. It doesn't make the behavior, right necessarily, but like it is what tends to happen is that, or they don't know. Like, that's the other thing I noticed in that separation, is there are a lot of people who I would call like friends, acquaintances, who simply didn't know all the ins and outs of what was going on because they weren't in the relationship and they weren't close to me. So of course they were, still friends because they didn't know anything different. Like, they didn't know all the details. And I might not be saying this, I'm saying this kind of messy, but as someone who's like had a really hard break from somebody where I really feel like I was not treated well, it was hard to have, friends stay friends with him. Or for me, it wasn't even necessarily that. It's just like, call him on some bullshit. Like that was more it for me. It wasn't actually the friends thing that got me. It was like, okay, you're seeing this and you're saying this to me, but say it to him. That's a side tangent.
Yeah.
But it is difficult, and that's where I think, like, that's where I go back to, like, it's seriously priceless to have friends outside of that who can hold you and support you. And for me at the time, like, I had a therapist to hold and support me too, through that experience, and that was priceless. And that kind of going back to like some more of the support angles. But anyway, I'm rambling, so
No, you're good. That, it makes a lot of sense, and thank you for sharing that. I think there's so many different dynamics, there's so many different cases, right? I think sometimes, like in that situation with what you're describing, which also leads us to know one of my little articles I found one day was talking about how the people that try to be neutral in the middle often, yeah, I see you nodding your head. So they often end up sometimes getting exiled by both parties or something along those lines. But I think in a situation as intense as your past situation was, it makes sense because I think when it comes to unhealthy patterns and somebody, quote unquote, just for lack of a better phrasing, doing somebody else wrong, I think some people, because in that, even that, right, there's like a huge spectrum for that. Like, okay, how wrong, if you will, did they do my friend, did they do this person? So I think in that situation there, it's especially helpful to have friends outside of the friends that you share, where you can go and get support. And that's something to consider, because for me personally, I love being friends with people that have certain standards and certain values. And sometimes, right, you either get closer or right, you get to move through it together with your friends, or like, okay, it's time to prioritize other people. So I think in maybe the heavier end of the spectrum of somebody being done wrong and a friend trying to be neutral in the middle, it's just helpful to be like, okay, I'm going to go prioritize other people in general. Because for me personally, I wouldn't want, if I was friends with a couple and one of them really did, like something to another one of them, I don't know if I would want to be friends with that person. However, that line is different for everybody. For some people, that line is cheating, whatever it may be. And I do think I'm a big advocate for, we need to give each other grace and empathy. And at the same time, when it comes to, for me, certain instances and certain topics, I have certain values that I want to embody and have other people around me embody. And so to flip it a little bit, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I've also had situations where I have had people where the breakup was amicable, where we were fine. And honestly, like, I think it was harder on our friends. So, and that can be really hard for some people to deal with. And again, it doesn't mean, like, the breakup that I went through where we split custody of our friends, there was a lot of compartmentalization. There was a lot of, okay, you, right, like, go support this person. I'm not going to change your mind about this person. However, there was also not like a lot of quote unquote wrongdoing in that case. So it was easier to do that and to be like, okay, go, I don't need to hear about what this person's doing. I think that's really helpful and huge. And in this other breakup that I had, where it was really hard on my friends in that instance, that happens. And friendship and relationships, like, they're just like an ever-flowing tapestry. And so if it is really hard on your friends, I think part of it too is it's so huge to not make it mean something about you. It's literally about that person's capacity to hold those discomforts and compartmentalize. And I think, one, as empathetic and emotionally, like, intelligent people, not that these people aren't, but emotionally intelligent people, as coaches, like, I'm really freaking good at compartmentalizing. I could talk to one friend about a breakup and the other friend that later the day and be completely present with both of those people. I have 2 clients right now that are sisters, and they just moved their schedules around where now they're on the same day. It's really funny to me. And and most of the time they're not talking about each other, but we also set certain boundaries. Like, they're not allowed to say their sister's name. They're only allowed to say my sister, because that's the role that that person plays in their individual session. However, so I also encourage them to compartmentalize. But that's not for everybody, right? And we can't make it mean something about us when that is just reflective of their capacity. to do that.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a very good point around the boundaries. So that was the other thing I kind of put off to the side of my mind of recognizing and communicating your boundaries to the shared friends. So I personally define boundaries as access to what is yours. So your time, your energy, your body, your life, that's how I define it. And so in breakups, the way I think that can look is by saying, hey, like, I don't really feel comfortable with my ex knowing these things about my life. I don't want you to talk to them about my dating life. Please respect that. I don't want them to, you know all the ins and outs of my personal thoughts and feelings. Like, I don't want them to have access to that anymore. And then also, to some degree, like, I think there has to be some mindfulness around all of this, but maybe make some requests. Like, if it isn't healthy for you or isn't what you want right now to hear about their life, say that to your friends, or say, like, hey, I'm comfortable with you hanging out with them. Like, you have your own relationship with them. I totally respect that. For where I'm at right now, like, it would just be better for me if I didn't get updates about where they're at. And that can change. Like, the boundaries and the requests can absolutely change. You can have that conversation again. But I think part of friendships and being vulnerable with our friends and giving them the opportunity to support us is by clearly communicating where we're at. Now, like, where I think there has to be balance to that is the difference of, making a request of a friend and versus, like, you need to do this or else, like, or else you're not my friend, or, you're an ass or something like that. But everything around the boundaries that you mentioned, I think that's helpful too in dynamics. And the other piece was that your friends also have autonomy, and they're going to make their own decisions, and they're going to make their own choices too. And being open to navigating that with them, or even just finding some level of acceptance that is going to happen, I think is helpful.
Yeah. Oh, 1,010% agree. You also, I nodded when it came to, okay, if we have a friend that is in that, because I think we really touched on this whole spectrum, but I really want to touch because I know maybe there's just somebody out there or somebody that is coming back to listen to this episode, and they're in that situation where they felt like their partner really did them wrong, or that there was harm. Let's put it that way. I think that's a better word. And if they're in a situation where their partner harmed them and their friends know about it and are not calling out those behaviors and things like that, do you have any advice or any perspective that you would like to offer somebody in that particular situation?
So I don't want to avoid the question. I also just recognize there's so much nuance to that question. Because when we're talking about harm, especially, I think about, like, are we talking about like name calling and blame that was unfair in the perspective of somebody, or are we talking about really emotional abuse and physical abuse in the relationship? So I think that there's nuance here. I think that again, I'm kind of skirting around for a minute, but I will answer. Like, the other thing I'm kind of taking into perspective is it safe for the other person to call them out on that behavior? Like, also, like, when we talk about safety of people, is it safe, or do they have ways to do that? Like, is there a path for them to do that? I think that in cases where there's really been some harm done, I kind of come at it from a couple different perspectives. The first perspective is, what do you need for yourself? And okay, for yourself, maybe that is a social group outside of the shared friends. Maybe that is some more professional support. Maybe that is, it's hard, but sometimes I think it's cutting your losses with those friends. That was the hardest thing for me. Like, I got to a place where I really felt there was harm done. Like, yes, to me, or with me, but also the pattern of harm is what I saw. And of course, it's my perspective on the situation. But for me, I going back to those values you mentioned, I have a set of like what I call my core values of a person. And my core values in relationships tend to be honesty and being direct. And so I noticed that there were some values that weren't matching up in those relationships. And the funny thing is, I still have a lot of love and care for a lot of the people I was friends with, but it is no longer a friendship that is aligned for us. And it doesn't have to be around any hard feelings. It's just the truth sometimes is that, it's not good for me to keep trying to mentally compartmentalize this dynamic. Like I don't want to. There's a lot of relationships where I kind of sat with myself and I thought like, I just don't want to, and that's okay. And so I think like part of it is finding your own sources of support, thinking about what you need for yourself, being willing to let go of some friendships if it's not a fit. And then, yeah, that's kind of actually my answer.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. Like harm looks like a lot of different things, and I think no matter what, you have to prioritize your well-being. Like if you are mentally, emotionally, physically not in a position to have that sort of shared friendship, and the friends either are not able to or are not willing to hold the ex accountable, then I think there is an element of having to make peace with that and do what is best for you. And I'm not saying that is easy, but I do think in the long run that is the one that pays off the most than trying to contort yourself to make it okay when it's just not okay with you.
Yeah. So well said. Thank you so much for such a graceful, compassionate, heartfelt answer, because I even though there's a whole spectrum when it comes to all of this, when it comes to breakups, when it comes to the shared friends, when it comes to the situation, there's a spectrum. Everything is such a case by case basis. I know it's very sensitive, and like you said, it looks different for everybody as far as that goes, but I do think that is really helpful for somebody to hear, because unfortunately, and this is just my guess, a guess if you will, but unfortunately I do think sometimes when we are in positions like that, it is really helpful to hear, hey, this is probably not best for you and your well-being, and even associating with these people is not best for you either. That can be really helpful just for somebody to hear. So thank you so much for doing that. I know that it doesn't apply to everybody listening, but it does apply to somebody. And I do think that matters. And hearing that can be really helpful. So thank you for sharing that. I think I'm going to skip the Reddit stories. There was just so much I wanted to talk to you about.
That's okay.
And I know we're at time, but we'll have to have you come back to
I'm sorry
talk
if that
about
last
it.
answer was clunky. Like
No, it was so
one of those
beautiful.
things where it's like, it's just like hard with so many different forms of harm.
There is. It was such a loaded question too to drop on you as well. I was just thinking, like, I know there's somebody, right? Like in this situation.
I mean, I was that person, right? Who was like really trying to I don't care if some of this stays in, but like I think like I was that person who was trying to make it all work, like trying to like I think part of it is like you have to just be honest about how much you're willing to invest in trying to make people understand. And at some point, the investment isn't paying off. And do you want to keep investing in something that's not paying off, or invest in something that will? So it's a hard question.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. That's my answer.
No, that is a beautiful answer. And I think too, I'm just going to guess as well, but like some of the hesitation comes from, right? Because when it comes to harm, I know you and I've talked a lot about like, oh, we're not qualified on these topics over here.
Yeah.
So I also did just drop this bomb on you to answer a question, put you in a position. So I'm sorry for doing that.
That's okay.
And I appreciate your answer so much, because again, even though that's not something that we help people with and we would refer those people, I think in general, it's helpful for somebody in that situation to hear from somebody else that's gone through it, and because a lot of times as it not in a like romantic relationship, but as somebody who has experienced some level of now I'm like, what do I want to say? But as somebody who has experienced like emotional abuse, you start to feel like, like you second guess everything. And so for someone to say and give permission of, no, this is not best for you at some point, like, do you want to keep making them understand? I think it was very well said. And so, one, I'm sorry for dropping the bomb on you, but two,
No,
thank you
it's
so much for
okay.
your answer and for sharing that. And I hope that if you are listening and you are this person, you're like, oh my gosh, they are speaking to me right now. They are speaking about me. Just know that Lucy and I are sending you so much love and all the support. And I know sometimes like taking that step to go to therapy and in that kind of instance, that is a therapeutic realm.
Yeah.
And
I would love to, I'm sorry, I'm totally like cutting in, but I would also love at some point, and maybe this is another episode, maybe this is you coming on my podcast, like whatever works, but I'd love to also talk about scopes and like, you know, for someone thinking about like therapy or coaching, like I just think that's a conversation that needs to be had, because we talk about it a lot and making sure that we're staying within our scope and like what we can do to support someone. But I don't feel like there's enough resources in the coaching world to be able to make that decision for self. Like what I always say to people, if you're second guessing yourself, do therapy. Like if you're not sure, just do therapy first. And then like you can supplement with coaching. But like, I don't know. I feel like a conversation would be cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, you read my mind. And I love that you said that too. Because again, what we're talking about today as well, like there's so much like spectrum and things like that. So I also think that is a really great place to leave people on, to get people like thinking about it as well. And if anybody does have questions of like, oh, like what would I get for coaching? I think one thing that Lucy really talked about today is like, okay, this is a lot about like practical skills and knowledge. I'm really big on let's apply the knowledge to your own life for social anxiety and for meaningful connection. So let's apply the knowledge to you in an evidence-based way, like through evidence-based practices that'll work for you. And I know Lucy is about like the same thing. So yes, we should definitely have a conversation like that. Girl, you read my mind. And again, now you all can see why I love Lucy so much.
We're on the same page.
So, you know, everybody go follow Lucy at lucy.m.price and peer pressure her to cut back on the podcast. And again, go check out her one-on-one coaching that she has available, where she really dives into the mindset, emotional regulation, and practical relating skills, which I think is so helpful. So if you are going through heartbreak right now, definitely go check Lucy out. And if you're in a situation as well where you're like, I don't know what's best for me, that $25 workshop is so accessible and is going to help you so much. So go check that out. Lucy, thank you so much for coming on this Socially Delightful podcast. It's overdue.
Thank you so much for having me. You were such a delight. I love you so much.
I love you so much. All right. Well, and I will see y'all at the next episode.
Thanks for joining me on the Socially Delightful podcast. I'm Jewel, and I'm truly so grateful that you came and hung out with me today. If this podcast meant something to you, it would mean so much to me if you left me a review so that way I could keep making content that you love. And if you really want to make my whole day, share this podcast to your Instagram story and tag me at Connection with Jewel so I can shout you out. Or send me a message and let me know what resonated with you or what you want to hear next. And I'll see you at the next episode.